Hey, Tim Frisch with A Frisch Perspective here. In Los Angeles, it sounds like COVID cases are really on the rise. I see some headlines here. It says LA County sets new record with 8,860 COVID-19 cases reported Friday. Another article says Mayor Eric Garcetti, this is the greatest threat to life in LA that we have ever faced. So there's obviously a lot of angst out there about COVID-19 and the pandemic. In the meantime, I've talked about Pastor John MacArthur and Grace Community Church continuing to meet indoors during this time. And obviously, in light of what I'm saying here about the spread of the disease, there has been a lot of criticism directed at Pastor MacArthur. And on Sunday night, during their Sunday evening service at Grace Community, he actually really laid out his case for how he sees the COVID-19 situation. So I thought it would be good in this video to play a lot of that for you so you could really hear how he looks at this situation.
Before we actually launch into questions, and I don't want to take a lot of time with this, I'm constantly being asked questions about what's going on in the country, about COVID, about lockdowns, about all of those kinds of things. And I want you to know that I don't have any secret inside information, but I do my very best to examine what's available so that I can help people to understand what we're facing. And rather than try to answer these things sort of one piece at a time, let me just share with you some information that I think will be of help to you. I trust it will be. This approach to the virus obviously has devastating impact on many people. In Japan, in 1 month, there were as many suicides as there have been in COVID deaths through the entire almost year-long siege. We know about that. There are people who are missing their normal medical care, and consequently, they have serious medical complications. In some states, as many as a third of businesses, small businesses, have become closed and are unlikely to open. I read that as many as half of businesses owned by black people will not be able to open. Devastating financial results. A fascinating statement that I read recently is that there's an expectation that there will be 300,000 to 500,000 fewer babies born next year. That's a remarkable statement made by the Wall Street Journal at the end of November. Births were down about 50,000 last year, and this year, compare that to 300,000 to 500,000 as people have such existential fear that they're less likely to want to bring children into the world. We all know the nursing home saga and the sadness of that. There's a new death cause on certificates, and it's failure to thrive. It's used with those who die in those kind of facilities, and because nobody can visit them, the care descends, and I won't even describe the horrors of how those people are living when they're cut off completely from family. We all know that the price being paid by children is immense. The Journal of American Medicine, probably the premier medical journal in this country, put out a study in November 12th. And the study shows the educational attainment effect in years of life lost with young children because they're not in school. 24 million children, the ages of 5 to 11, have been out of school. They have models that translate that into years. Your length of education and quality of education is a determiner of your length of life. And the Journal of American Medicine estimates that we've lost about 5.53 million years in the lives of 5 to 11-year-old children in the future. The single greatest indicator for high school graduation is fourth grade reading skill. And as that plummets, because only 60% of the kids who are supposed to be doing online learning are actually doing it, and only 1/3 of them do it every day, their ability to read sinks, and their ability to get out of high school sinks, and there are all kinds of effects of that show up in an increased mortality rate. The Journal of American Medical Association is saying we are sacrificing our young, ostensibly to save adults who are not vulnerable. CDC survival rate, if you are up to 70, you have a 99.998 chance to survive COVID. In California, in the courts, in our case, it was presented to the court that in California you have one chance in 19.1 million to die of COVID. You say, well, it's a serious thing if somebody catches it. It can be like any kind of flu or virus, and it can be very serious if there are, as we know, comorbidities, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. There are some people who should be protected, and we've always been careful to do that, and we should be doing that again. But even if you're over 70, you have a 95% chance to survive, and that's with 10 to 15% of that population in that age group with comorbidities. Some medical experts are calling for us to stop calling this a pandemic. Essentially, they're wanting us to call it a syndemic. Pan means all. By virtue of the statistics of the CDC, if 99.998 people survive, that is not all being affected by it, even if they do have some symptoms. But what it really is a syndemic in that it synthesizes with other factors of obesity and heart disease and overweight and things like that, and in that combination, it becomes much more potentially significant. The Washington Post came out with an article that said everyone wore masks during the 1918 flu pandemic. They were useless. 50 million at least died in that pandemic because there was really no way to resolve it medically. The latest that I've read is out of the 50 million, let's say 30 million died of pneumonia, which is sort of that syndemic notion. Masks became symbolic. People were told, wear it once and wash it and sterilize it, and once you put it on, don't ever touch it if you expect it to work. I received a report from UCLA, the internal report, that in the entire system, they have tested about 140,000 people for COVID, and out of that, in their whole system, there are 27 people in the hospital with some COVID complications. 27 out of testing maybe is close to 150,000. There's one other thing I would just mention to you. Johns Hopkins, one of the great medical schools in our country, did a study of COVID-19. They released the study on the 22nd of this month, of November rather. It's titled, Relatively No Effect in Deaths in the U.S. The question that keeps coming up is, are more people dying than die in other years? And that's what this study was intended to find out. The study declares that the number of deaths is not alarming. In fact, it has relatively no effect on the number of deaths in the United States. Retrieving data from the CDC website revealed that the deaths of older people stayed the same before and after COVID. Since it mainly affects older people, experts expected an increase in the percent of deaths in the older group. Data says that didn't happen. The percentage of deaths among all age groups remained relatively the same as time period from 2014 to 2020. So if COVID-19 has no significant effect on U.S. deaths in the total number, why does it appear so? And this report says deaths from 2014 to 2020 were examined. There was a sudden increase in COVID deaths in the year 2020. Analysis of deaths per cause in 2018 showed the pattern of seasonal increases in death for all causes during the flu season. The leading cause of death is heart disease. In 2020, during that same period, COVID-19 related deaths exceeded heart disease deaths. Unusual because heart disease prevails as the number one cause of death. Here's the interesting part. Looking closer at the numbers, it was clear that compared to 2018, the 2020 numbers showed no drastic increase across all causes. Rather, there was a dramatic decrease in deaths due to heart disease. And here's the key. The total decrease in deaths by all other causes almost exactly equals the increase in death by COVID-19. They just assigned a different cause. There is, and you can look these things up yourself, there is a declaration called the Great Barrington Declaration, signed by 10,000 medical doctors and epidemiologists and experts, public health scientists. And the Great Barrington Declaration has grave concerns about how COVID-19 is being dealt with. That document says lockdowns are producing devastating results on short and long-term public health. This is not the right approach, and they recommend, these 10,000 experts, that we allow those with minimal risk to live life normally and build up natural immunity. Now, those are just some things that I wanted to give you to maybe ease some of the fears that you might have. As I said long ago when we first got into this, that we are the people of the truth, and we will always do the very best we can to tell you the truth. You don't need to be a victim of lies and deception, but when you see the people who are your leaders sitting around a table hours and hours together, health officials with the governor and no masks and no social distancing, having a party, you might wonder whether they actually believe what they're asking you to do. I'm just very grateful for your faithfulness. Very grateful for your trust and confidence in the Lord and in the church, and for the wisdom of our elders, and for bringing us into contact with people who understand the truth. We don't want anybody to be unprotected. We don't want anybody to be unsafe. But life is a terminal illness, and far better to depart and be with Christ. So that's the best that can happen to us. But the statistic is so overwhelming. 99.998% of people will have no lasting effect from this. How can we literally tear the world to shreds over that? Other forces are at work. We're just glad to be here proclaiming the truth, right? Worshiping the Lord. So thank you for your faithfulness.
So there you go. I know not everybody will agree with everything that Pastor MacArthur is laying out there, but I wanted you to hear it and really just fully hear how he puts out his case. I thought it was really interesting. I think he does make some good points, but I'm sure there's going to be some counter arguments to what he's saying. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Just try to keep your comments constructive and helpful to conversation so that hopefully we can all come to a greater understanding of truth, which is what we want to do. But thank you so much for watching this report and listening to some of my thoughts from A Frisch Perspective.